Say, hey, good looking, what you got cooking? How's about cooking something up with me?
I'm Louisa Chu with Chewing the Fat, and this week's mystery food sound of the week, we actually go into Monica's home, into her kitchen, into her breakfast, actually.
Don't judge how messy it is.
And that's all the clues I'm going to give you.
Okay. And it's something that I eat just about every day.
Shocking, actually. It's kind of shocking. So one of the conventions with audio is that we tell each other what we have for breakfast at the beginning. And invariably, your breakfast seemed to start off with this particular food item.
Say, hey, good looking, what you got cooking? How's about cooking something up with me?
Recently, I did a story for the afternoon shift where I went to a Kankakee farm to watch a hog slaughter that I see every year, that I've seen for 5 years. And I talked to a lot of chefs and kids about how they felt about seeing a slaughter. Is it something you've ever seen? Or?
Yeah, I can't remember if I've seen a hog slaughter. No, I definitely have not seen a hog slaughter. But I was going to say, wasn't that you just did a story and you went? You brought with you?
Well, I brought my kids on previous occasions, and actually one of our bosses here, he brought his 12-year-old son. And so that was pretty controversial. You know, should you let kids see the meat that they eat? And a lot of the chefs felt it was really important for them to see it. But one thing that I didn't get to get into in this piece was how actual farmers feel about it. You know, you think that some farmers are like, yeah, this is what I do. But I found that they were actually very thoughtful about what they were doing. And sometimes late at night, they second-guessed themselves. So here is Harry Carr, who owns Mint Creek Farm in the Kankakee area, raises sheep and some cows and some hogs. Here's what he had to say about it.
What I've wondered probably too much about is being responsible for raising all these animals and then slaughtering them for meat. Who am I to kill this animal? What right do I have to take its life and to send it into the other world? And I struggle with that. It's the hardest thing that I do, raising animals. I can rationalize, well, if I stop believing in what I'm doing and I had to get rid of my animals, they're all going to get slaughtered by somebody else, which, you know, so it's like same difference there. Sheep and mankind have co-evolved over the last 10,000 years together, and we're here for each other, and we put an awful lot of work into making their life as comfortable and as pleasant and as pastoral as possible. And it's really hard to come to this point where you're taking the lives of some, but we do this so that the rest can live, so that we can live. Because the bottom line is that if you stop killing them, you've got overpopulation, and then they'll really be suffering.
So as I was thinking about that, I thought, wow, I mean, even they think about it. When I was hunting a few years ago, I would stay up at night saying, okay, so I eat meat, but I never really killed anything, so I'm not really responsible. Like, let's say I went to the Great Beyond. They couldn't ever say that I killed a deer myself. But then I wondered, well, what about butchers? Are they, because they make money off of it, are they complicit? If somehow we find out that this was not okay, who's complicit? Have you ever thought of something like that?
I have to say, going back to what Harry has said, I eat meat as well, although usually at home I don't cook meat just because I know I'll be eating quite a bit of it out. And I do struggle with it sometimes because I would argue, and many would argue, that we don't have to raise the sheep to eat. There's not a natural overpopulation situation the way there is with deer. There is a situation where we have overpopulation of wild game animals, but not necessarily of sheep. So is that a better or worse thing that we have animals that we raise in order to kill to eat meat? So it is a dilemma.
And there's the argument that the animals would never have been alive at all if they hadn't been raised for this. And Harry, I should note, has one of these farms where the animals just live and frolic outdoors with their families their whole lives until that last. He likes to say, my animals only have one bad day in their entire life. And yet you do have a lot of vegans who say, This whole idea of humane meat is kind of a sham, and, there is no need. We can argue all day long whether or not certain people have nutrient deficiencies if they don't eat meat, but they believe that no one really needs it. And so we talked to the head of investigations at Mercy for Animals about this idea of humane meat.
Well, I think that there are some farms that treat animals better than others, and certainly better than some of the largest scale factory farms. But I think that's setting the bar a little low. The reality is that these animals on these farms are still separated from their families. They're still mutilated without painkillers, and their deaths are always the same: bloody, violent, and unnecessary. There's simply no human nutritional need to consume animal products. So anytime that we're killing these animals, we have to realize that these are, unless we want to eat diseased animals, we're paying people to kill healthy, young animals who want to live, just like our dogs and cats at home. And when we have healthy alternatives, that you can go to the grocery store and buy alternatives to meat, dairy, and eggs, then the compassionate thing to do would be to choose those alternatives.
And I have to say that there are some evolutionary biologists, though, who say that it's from eating meat that our brains develop bigger and that we're able to be the human race that we are. So while we are addressing the subject of meat in our food podcast, this first episode, we also want to give vegan choices enough room and have a whole episode devoted to veganism as well. I think that we don't necessarily have to eat meat any longer. There are good alternatives.
I think there are enough people I know who do super well on vegan diets. The woman who was our photographer on our hunting series, her health has never been better. And then I've known some people who were ethical vegans and believed in it so much, but they were sick people. Once they got meat again, they felt better. I think everybody's body has different nutritional needs and quirks. And so I'm not going to say that one way is perfect for everybody. But certainly there are a lot of people who have done very, very well on vegan diets. Well, and Paul Kahn was in here recently. He's the chef owner of Blackbird, Publican Quality Meats, and the soon-to-open Nico.
Mm-hmm.
And, obviously he likes meats. And I said, well, what do you have to say to vegans who say, I don't care how well you source it, this is still killing animals, killing young animals?
Everyone certainly can make their own choices. And if you choose to be a vegan for ethical reasons or health reasons, that's totally okay. But I personally believe, I own a butcher shop, and we put a great deal of time into sourcing local and sustainable animals that are well cared for and healthy and of super high quality. So I think the American system of, factory farms, the way meat has been raised, giant portions of protein, just the way people eat in general is wrong. And I think what we push at our butcher shop is, you do have to spend more money to get meat that's raised the right way from people that care. And we have farmers that absolutely care about every part of the life of the animal, and they care about when the animals are breeding, and they provide company for the animals, and it just goes to a really high degree, and that's what we love. So I think protein is, for most people, is an important part of their diet. If part of a balanced diet, it's really important to your health. So I like meat. I'm a chef. I think most chefs do. I like fish too, and all those things. But I just think it's conscious sourcing and doing things the right way.
So I appreciate that Paul says that everyone can make their own choice, but when it does come to ethical or sustainable meat right now, we can't, because it is markedly more expensive. So we either have to choose to eat ethical, sustainable meat, which is going to be more expensive, or sometimes choose not to eat meat. And I do very much appreciate that you and I both come from cultures where meat is not that
the main course,
right?
Not the center of the plate.
Exactly.
But I think he talks about that. He and Rob Levitt talked about it. How can we afford your meat? By having much smaller portions. Most people don't know. A deck of cards, that's how big it is. That's how big your meat's supposed to be, 4 ounces. Even the American Meat Institute says 4 ounces. Who eats 4 ounces?
I know, but even getting to that 4 ounces, you know what I mean? We talk about food deserts and how difficult it is to actually have any source of food, any sorts of sources of groceries. And in Chicago, we have 2 really terrific sources pretty close to the downtown area and not that much more the couple of Whole Foods maybe.
No, it's true. It's hard to find
difficult to even
sustainable
get to
meat.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are CSAs, and we'll be telling you in the future how if you want to get sustainable meat, how you can do that and get it somewhat affordably. For me, it was buying half a hog, but that you got to put $600 cash on the barrelhead, son.
And have room to put half a hog. I mean,
Right,
all your other stuff.
and clear out that darn freezer.
Right. No, you got to get a whole separate freezer. I mean, that's a pretty big chunk of meat and meat parts.
Well,
And-
sometimes eating ahead is about investing in certain things and thinking ahead, which I know not everybody can do.
Right.
For sure.
Please. I mean, that is a whole other area. I mean, not only having the resources to store it, but also to know how to cook it. And again, I understand and I appreciate what they're saying. I think it's really important that we acknowledge that it's a very difficult topic, that not only
Ethically, but economically,
Correct.
Culturally, there are all sorts of hurdles.
because as much as we all keep saying it in the food media, that there are subsidies behind the cheaper cuts of meat that are not behind these ethical and sustainable sources of meat. So people want to know why you can get the dollar burger and you have to pay so much more for these other kinds of meats. Well, there's a lot of complicated issues in terms of the financial wheelings and dealings behind it too. So,
And we'll get into those in future weeks, as well as how to really nicely cook those cheap cuts of sustainable meat. So what do you think about the high cost of sustainable meat? And what are some of your tips for making your meat dollar go further? Do you think there's any such thing as humane meat?
we would love to hear what you think, what you have to say. Let us know at wbez.org/chewingthefat.
So this weekend, Louisa, you went to the kitchens of Fat Rice for a really, really interesting pastry that Chef
did.
Abe Conlon was cooking up. Tell us about it.
So this past weekend was the Third Coast International Filmless, what I called the Feastival. Only I called it that, and then I got you calling that, and no one else knew what it was. And it was audio stories inspired by the idea of appetite. And the People's Choice winner was around this blackbird pie, the classic 4 and 20 blackbird pie. And Chef Abe Conlon at Fat Rice, he made his version of it using, instead of 24 blackbirds, 7 quail that he got from a live poultry market here in Chicago.
The one right next door to Who's Your Mama's Pie.
Yep.
But it was like, yeah, that pie, it like had all these claws sticking out of it. It looked like Evil Dead, like chicken zombies coming up from the grave. But it was delicious.
It was. It was probably actually more delicious than the historic 4 and 20 blackbird pies. But so I visited him at the kitchens of Fat Rice and was there when he pulled it out of the oven and talked to him a little bit about his inspiration and how he came up with this recipe.
It's very dramatic looking because, I mean, I think the story is kind of gruesome. The story was about the origins of 4 and 20 blackbirds, the kind of nursery rhyme or song, and it was based off of an actual dish that was made with, you could fit about 24 blackbirds in a pie because they're very small, they're slightly bigger than a large man's thumb, and they're all baked in the pie with the feet and everything on so that you can easily pick it up and portion it and kind of eat it and suck the meat off the bone. I think we've gotten far away from where food comes from with, prepackaged food and processed food, and people don't want to see the head on their fish or see the foot on their chicken or to have any blood in their steak or anything like that. We've got far away from that. So I wanted to kind of make a visual impact and to also stay true to the dish to make sure that when the consumer, whoever's eating it, could actually pick it up by the legs and go ahead. And I think the bird itself kind of cooks nicely if it's cooked as a whole. I didn't imagine it having any exotic flavors. I think you imagine it being, a little bit gamey, like a quail or a squab or something to that effect. But you just kind of think, this is a recipe. It's over 100 years old. I even got a recipe from 1888 that I found and kind of went off then. And it's like, yeah, this is just a normal thing. They're not putting truffles in it. There's not fireworks spitting out of it. I mean, it's a basic gravy with some vegetables and a bunch of birds and a pie and some crust on top.
This is Chewing the Fat, and I'm Monica Eng.
I'm Louisa Chu.
And our next segment will be a recurring segment that Louisa doesn't like my name idea for, but for now we're going to call it Around Chicagoland in 80 Dumplings.
Wait, I thought it was Around the World in 80 Dumplings.
Well, no, because it's Chicago. Well, we'll figure it out. We haven't figured out a name. But
Dumplings are involved.
For our very first dumpling, we went and looked for a dumpling that I've been searching for about 10 or 15 years. And we finally, I think, found a pretty good one, right, Louisa?
Not just looking for a dumpling, but this is possibly one of the most controversial dumplings in the world.
Dumpling controversy.
Exactly. And if you ask anybody what one of the toughest dumplings to find is, it is this particular dumpling, which is the
xiaolongbao, which means little soupy dumpling. And usually it's got pork or pork and crab, and it's got to have this incredible skin that both holds all the soup in it, but also is tender enough to be delicious. And here's how our recent xiaolongbao treasure hunt went. We have just been given what we're hoping will be delicious soup dumplings. And we have been in search of decent soup dumplings, also called xiaolongbao, in Chinatown, in Chicago, anywhere in the Chicago area for years. And Louisa, what are your hopes for these dumplings?
I'm hoping that they're going to be a little more correct than a lot of the ones we found, to have a nice wrapper, which has a nice silky smooth texture, and juice. You want the juice to burst out.
So I'm eating my first bite, and I'm afraid it did not burst with the most delicious broth in the world, which is what I expect. It's a nice meaty filling, but I'm not getting a juice. How about you? It looks like yours might be more promising.
While it looks tasty, it did not look promising because there's a certain silkiness which is really key to the wrapper, and I could already tell that these are not silky, fresh wrappers.
They're more puckery than silky, although yours looks like it might have some juice in it. I'm having high hopes for yours.
That's fine.
That was me slurping and getting nothing.
Okay, I'm taking my first bite of the xiaolongbao, and it's really key to tip it on its side and then take a bite out of a corner and sip at the same time to catch any escaping soup. But in this case, there really wasn't much escaping soup. Whatever soup there was juice that was already absorbed back into the meatball filling, basically. So, a good tasty dumpling, but not a good xiaolongbao.
Yeah, I would agree. It is tasty, but I want a mouthful of soup there, and I'm just not getting it. Okay, so here we are at Heng Ki Restaurant, where the last time I was here, I was not thrilled with the xiaolongbao, but here we are 4 months later, and we're gonna take a bite in just a second. I'm not gonna have it until Louisa has hers. She's just spilled a bunch of vinegar. Well, maybe I will have mine before Louisa. So I'm biting a tiny little hole. Okay, let's get Louisa slurping.
So there is soup in this little soup bun. The flavor is good. It's very, the soup is actually kind of a lot of fatty pork broth. So it is very silky and fatty. So it's tasty, soupy, but I just have to say, really an ugly xiaolongbao. So a good contender. Not great, but good.
But so far, I have to say, this might be the best one I've tasted in Chicago, here at Heng Ki. So I thought that was a pretty good trip. I mean, I've had such bad luck with xiaolongbao over the years. I'm glad Heng Ki was good. I know you didn't like the looks of them.
It was. They were so ugly, actually. And I mean,
you know what?
It's not just how they look. Like I said, it is about the technique, because you have this really thin wrapper that needs to be pinched and folded in just the right way, because it has to be structurally sound to hold this fatty, silky pork broth inside after it's hot and steamed. So it's not just how it looks. But I was watching that woman roll, and she was not doing it right.
Well, you know what? As long as it tastes good, I'll take it. Until the beautiful ones come along, until Din Tai Fung, which is like the pinnacle of soup dumplings in Taipei, comes along, I'll take them.
And hopefully they'll have another one here. I'm still torn. I really wish we had a better xiaolongbao little soup dumpling here in Chicago, but I've had some really great ones around the world. And then my dad's side of the family is from northern China, so that's really hard to compare.
Well, I wish I could go back to Flushing or Taipei every day, but I can't. And so I will take this. And if it's not the perfect one, we've got 79 more dumplings to go. And you can suggest some of them at wbez.org/chewingthefat or
check out our Facebook page. We'll have a link to our dumpling discussion, Dumpling Wars, or contact us at Twitter.
Or the old-fashioned old person way, you can email us at chewingthefat@wbez.org.
And by the way, xiaolongbao, it literally translates to little steamer basket dumpling.
Oh, I know the one I would knew was xiaolongtangbao, so little steamer basket soup dumpling. What else?
Sugar dumpling, you're my baby. I love you in every way, 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 way. Sugar dumpling, you my baby. My love grows stronger every day. Yeah, sugar dumpling, you my baby. I love you in every way.
Monica, do you know what time it is?
Is it time to reveal another mystery food sound clue?
It is. We are going back into your kitchen.
And here we go.
That sounds so good. I can't believe you have that every day.
Well, I think there's been a lot of misinformation about the health of this item.
Okay. All right.
For our next segment, we're going to talk about a guy who spent the last 2 years and $5 million developing the Eggless Egg. Part of his funding has come from the Gates Foundation, and he believes that too many chickens are abused in the process of making factory-farmed eggs. And also, eggs are kind of out of the price range of a lot of people in the developing world. So he decided he's going to make the eggless egg.
Not just abuse, where there's a lot of unfortunate farming methods that go into egg making, but just the very beginning of it, when I was first looking at egg production, you don't really think. I always thought that you take the female chickens and then they lay your eggs, and then the male chickens, the ones that become big and the roosters, those become like your soup chickens. And no, actually, for people who may not know what happens in egg production.
If you're a boy, it's not good. It's the opposite of China. If you're a boy chick, what happens to you?
Well, there's this process which is called culling. And so the most adorable creatures in the world, these fuzzy little yellow chicks.
And we know that cute means worth living.
Yeah, and they're sexed, and so you figure out which one's the boy chicken and the girl chicken. And the boy little fuzzy little yellow chicks are taken and culled, and they're actually tossed live into a grinder, shredder. And that's how we have eggs. So it's very difficult. And so
there are a lot of things about industrial egg production that a lot of people don't like. So Josh Tetrick is out there to try to change that.
The more I looked at the food system, the more I realized that it's pretty bizarre. It's pretty cruel. It's pretty unsustainable, and particularly animal agriculture, and then more specifically, egg production. So for us, and for me personally, when you look at egg production, 1.8 trillion eggs are laid every year around the world. Trillion. And 99% of them come from places that are totally and unequivocally misaligned with our values and our interests. It's not a compassionate environment. It's not sustainable. It's not healthy for us, for the animal, and it's also pretty pricey. And we think that's crazy, and we think we can take the bird out of the equation and all the greenhouse gas emissions and instead just use plants that grow in fields. And ultimately, that's more affordable and more sustainable.
So he's found this legume that he can make into an emulsion that, frankly, I tried some of that mayonnaise and it tastes pretty good.
And we tasted cookies that were made with this eggless egg, and they were really good. I couldn't taste the difference between these chocolate chip cookies. I have to say, while I very much appreciate that, the hardest thing that I will miss about giving up eggs, if I ever do, is going to be the runny yolk. I do love that sunny side up.
I love it too. And at first, when I first heard about this, I'm like, what the heck? Why would you make an eggless egg? But he does make a good point. And I said, well, why don't you just push for better farming practices? He said, why can't we do both? And he said, I want to make this available to people in the developing world. He said it has even a higher protein level than regular eggs. So good for you, Mr. Tetrick. And by the way, he says that this eggless mayo is arriving in Whole Foods in the Midwest this week. You know what time it is, Louisa?
Monica, what time is it?
It's time for our top 3 list. Some people have top 5. We've got top 3. I was thinking top 8 because that's lucky for Chinese people, but 3's not bad.
All right.
And this week, since we've been talking meat and meatlessness, I thought we would do top 3 like really great meaty things to eat. And we've all already said that we don't like to waste meat. So I can start with one of mine, which is Italian sausage from Red Meat Market. That's an organization here in Chicago that really tries to get sustainable local meat on the table. I have a fight with my boyfriend. He's always going to a certain place in Lakeview that everybody loves for sausage. I won't mention their name. But it's not sustainable stuff. But these guys get it. They source it locally, and it's really tasty and about $7.99 a package. So redmeatmarket.com has terrific Italian sausage.
So is there a specific Italian sausage, or is it just the one Italian sausage they have?
They've got all sorts of crazy names. I think it's called Guido's Italian, and then for the Polish, it's kielbasa, and then they've got Mother Chorizo. So,
Are you sure about this? We don't
despite the names, I bought a whole bunch of this at the Wurstfest, and I'm really happy with it.
Okay. The best of the Wurst?
Yes. And
Right.
you?
My top meaty treat is not from a specific store. I gave a lot of thought about what my favorite meaty treat is, and I try to think about what I, as a cook or when I'm working as a professional chef, like to keep for myself, maybe steal for myself, and that has to be my top meaty treat is skin of all kinds. If you were to come to my...
Some skin's not so great. Like I've had cow skin soup at African restaurants. Too chewy.
It depends on how you make it, but I will agree. But my favorite types of meaty skin have to be, and if I'm going to follow along with your top 3, will probably be chicken.
Chicken skin dipped in vinegar. Yeah.
Many different preparations. Probably, if you were to come to my house and I were to roast a chicken, if there were pieces missing, I would probably lie to you and say it's stuck. Or if you're a good friend or family, I would just tell you I probably ate all your skin just for your own health. Salmon skin. Also
great. And
huge
with
favorite.
healthy animals, that skin is going to be holding fat that has great healthy fats for you.
Right. And it just tastes really good. And then probably my third is going to be pork skin.
Sure. So
Roasted
chicharrones or
chicharron, roasted pork skin. So those are my top 3 meaty treats that you can do at home.
Oh, so you did 3 in 1, 3 skins. Okay, well, so to add to the 3, I really like beef tendon. And I think what we're talking about is, not just using those choice cuts, not the breast, not the loins, but really try to find those other things that some people throw away. And that's beef tendon at Katie's Dumplings. There's a Naperville location, and there's now an Oak Park location. And that beef tendon, a lot of people, again, throw it away. They slice it thin. They put soy sauce and ginger and hot peppers. And they put it in the refrigerator. It looks disgusting. It tastes like heaven.
Okay. But when you say what it tastes like, so a lot of people may not be familiar with beef tendon. Can you describe what that
is? It's sort of creamy and gelatinous. And of course, because it's a tendon, there are a lot of people who believe that's really good for your tendons. Who knows? All I know is you lay that over a hot bowl of white rice or brown rice, and it's delicious.
And it's typically braised, so it's really flavorful. And if you like those kinds of soft, silky types of meats that you find in stews, you're going to like this. And granted, yes, it doesn't look wonderful and it doesn't have a great sounding name. If it was called something else, chicharron, it's a great name.
My children love beef tendon.
Right. But if you can get beyond that, then you can truly appreciate some of the lesser cuts.
All right. Top 3 meaty things. Okay, I think it's done. Okay, let's get a plate. So, Louisa, you know what that sound was?
What is that, Monica?
Well, we're about to reveal what our mystery food sound of the week is.
Right.
It's something that I eat almost every morning for breakfast. It's something that we've talked about earlier in this broadcast. Yes, a lot of commercial egg is what it is, production does involve some pretty unsavory practices, as we saw when the FDA cracked down on certain facilities. But I really love eggs, and I like to get them sourced well. I like to find the farmer or even the person in Chicago whose chickens have hatched them. And I just think they're delicious.
So we need to specify that it's not just an egg, which is our mystery food of the week, but it is your very own breakfast, which you typically fry in
home rendered lard. I get a Berkshire Heritage pastured hog, And I chop up all that fat, some of it the leaf fat, though I try to save that for pastry. And then I boil it down and render it into the most delicious lard ever. And then I keep it in these beautiful white jars near a very drafty window so it stays cool. And it's so delicious. So that was a fried egg frying in lard. And can you guess what implement I was cooking it in? I couldn't find my cast iron pan, so I was using a wok, and it really worked super well. Because if you treat those woks well, they are nonstick. You season them well, and they treat you so well back.